Well, hello there. How is everyone? I hope you're all well. It's Friday. It's Friday. You're looking absolutely fabulous, and I'm quite glad that this week is out of the way. There's been a lot happen. There's been a lot of things that we've had to address in terms of crazy people and the things that they say, and let's put that behind us and let's look forward now as we talk about the Idaho 4 pending court case. There's a lot of things happening. We've got a few hearings coming up. As Mr. Kohberger, he has asked for a further stay, and he is also, how can I say, he's seemingly gunning for this technical or technicality push, if you like. He's trying to say that things that have been done have not been done right, and this itself raises a lot of questions. And the question that keeps coming up, that you guys keep sort of coming to me and saying, and quite rightly so, I will say, even for us who are kind of on the fence with things, and my status has always been, I've felt Bryan Kohberger was involved but struggled to think that he did it on his own. Some people for some reason have ultimately thought that I am steadfast in the belief that Bryan Kohberger is completely innocent, and I've never been that way. I've contemplated that as a possibility when certain things have come out, but yeah, my thought process has always been that I felt that he was something to do with it, but struggled to see him doing it on his own. But look, people have quite rightly said, if he had an alibi, he'd be shouting it from the rooftops. He'd be screaming. Why would he sit there for this long and be like, well, I'm happy to sit here in jail and prison, whatever it is, and just ride the storm out for now. And I think it gets to a point where you think to yourself, look, what's happening here is either that he cannot prove his alibi. Now, an alibi, by definition, is to be able to say, this is what I was doing at the time you thought I was doing this, and this is my proof of that. This is my supportive evidence, so the whole lot can go forward and prove that what you're saying is true, and it, beyond a reasonable doubt, clears your name. And what you've got to think is a crime that takes place in the early hours of the morning, that is incredibly, if not impossible, for many, many people to do. If I was accused of doing a heinous act like this, say at 4 o'clock this morning or 3 o'clock this morning, what would my alibi have been? What would my alibi have truly been? What would yours have been? Let me know down below. But look, not doing something and not being able to prove you didn't do it is something that we see far too often. And this is in fact why many, many people end up wrongfully convicted. Not because they just simply they couldn't prove they didn't do something. And that is sometimes very, very important. But look, Bryan Kohberger, what are we seeing him do? And is there things that he's doing hinting towards that there could potentially be another alibi sitting there waiting to be addressed? And could that have been in the form of Bethany Funk? Now, we know just before the grand jury indictment happened that Bryan Kohberger was pushing for a sit down, or his team was pushing for a sit down with Bethany Funk to have a conversation, because an investigator working on behalf of the defence team had found information that he claimed was exculpatory to the client, and it involved Bethany Funk. And all of a sudden, that preliminary hearing that was in the winds, it was about to happen, all of a sudden gets sideswiped off the table, and we're here where we are now. So what Bryan Kohberger seems to be doing with this latest round of attacking the grand jury indictment is to try and push to go back to the preliminary hearing. Now, they've held off and said, look, we're going to stand silent still, and with respect of the alibi, turned around and said, look, this will come out, an alibi will come out during cross-examination, etc., during the trial itself, when the trial goes ahead. And I'm thinking to myself, well, what things could happen then? And I'm still drawn back to the Bethany Funk situation. The Bethany Funk situation, and thinking, look, if they can get the grand jury indictment tossed, now they could, in theory, or I think what they're thinking is they could potentially go back to a preliminary hearing, which would put Bethany Funk back on the table to have a conversation with. And furthermore, if none of this happens, and it does indeed go to trial, who could get brought in as a witness, called in by the defence, and they would have no choice, yet again, Bethany Funk. And the more things that happen, and the more absence of a different alibi, and the way in which the defence are seemingly attacking this, more and more shows me that there is a potential for Bethany Funk to indeed have some form of information or know something that could indeed assist Bryan Kohberger. Now, it doesn't mean that Bryan Kohberger is completely innocent of anything, but it could put a different angle upon what this crime was all about. Whether there was more people indeed there. Did Bethany Funk see more people there? Because what we have to appreciate is Bethany Funk is still a young adult. She's still a young adult. And if we're in a situation where Bryan Kohberger is not the culprit, he is not the person who did this, and there is someone else, or there is some bigger story behind all this, then she could be petrified. She could be petrified to speak. Now, we have heard, and albeit we can't offer any credibility to it because it's very hard to offer credibility to anybody, but we have indeed heard that there have been people who have said that these surviving roommates are not even interacting with the friends and people who they interacted with before all this happened. They're being very, very, they've gone off grid, so to speak. And that says quite a lot, because it's almost like you could say that they are hiding from something. They're distancing themselves from it. And you would think to yourself, look, if these two surviving roommates believed that this is over, the person who did it is now locked up, facing the death penalty, and this is going to now go through due process, and he will be found guilty, so on and so forth, and even they might even be able to offer evidence later on that would help to do that. Why would they be off grid? Why would they not have anything to say about anything? At the end of the day, there would be things that I'm sure that we would see happening or hear happening. That's just my interpretation. Now, some people say that the gag order would extend to them, so on and so forth, but I can't still understand why they have gone completely off grid entirely. If indeed they feel, to me, what I'm trying to say is it seems to me that they're afraid of something. And what is there to be afraid of? Yes, they were always going to catch some flack, and some people have questioned things, but ultimately, does that matter? If you are an honest person and you've done nothing wrong, and there is no guilt, there is no nothing, you know what happened, and you know that your house is secure, so to speak, it doesn't matter what people think. It doesn't matter what people say. And what people have got to understand is, in this situation, people are always going to have an opinion. And opinions are like arseholes. Everybody's got one. But what do you think? Now, in terms of the court case itself, do I think that this is going to head towards a dismissal? I actually don't. I now don't believe that this is going to go down the route of dismissal. Purely because you listen to the likes of George Tragus, that sexy beast's dad, he's quite clearly said, look, he's not seen, grand juries tossed because of this kind of attack, and this is kind of more perhaps a delay tactic by the defence in terms to extend their time to prepare. Now again, what else could you argue that they need to prepare? What are they doing behind the scenes to get themselves ready that means that they need more time? If they've already got everything they need, then they're good to go. But I think that this court case is going to go ahead in October. Now, do I think that the prosecution have something else, like we've sort of touched on in the past, an ace in the hole perhaps? And, maybe this is what some of us have thought it was going to be, and that is that this is going to turn into a trial by ambush, and indeed there is more. And maybe Bryan Kohberger is guilty as charged, and this is just a play to try and get a dismissal via technicality, because there is just simply no other way, because he did it, and it's as simple as that. And that is, of course, a possibility. But this Bethany Funk situation, the fact that this investigator felt like they found something, it was exculpatory to Bryan, and the angle that the prosecution, the defence, seems to be taking is to try and angle themselves back round so that they can have another shot at potentially getting Bethany Funk brought back. And again, they're well aware that that may not happen, so their second shot will be during the trial. Again, which I believe that their nod was that they will call Bethany Funk. Let me know down below what you think. Enjoy your Friday. I'm going to go and rub cream on my sunburn. I'll catch you all in the next one.